Third POV. May pressed the button, and the next video began with the classic death battle theme. For nearly 2 decades, people across the globe have struggled endlessly to make one crucial, exhausting, impossible choice. Wiz began the video. Bulbasaur, Squirtle, or Charmander? Boomstick proposed the infamous question. Ugh, yes, Sen exclaimed, throwing his arms in the air. You don't know how agonizingly long it took for me to choose between those 3 in my first Pokémon game. It's not like it gets any better in the other generations, Aways pointed out. Do you know how confusing it was for me to choose between the Gen 8 and 9 starters? The starter Pokémon, Wiz agreed. Your first companion into the world of Pokémon. Now, it's finally time to learn if the one you chose was really the strongest. Is this really that hard of a choice? Momo asked, both astonished and intrigued by how serious and drastic a decision in a video game was being referred to. Honestly, kinda, Izuku answered her. In Pokémon, even though you can catch up to hundreds of different Pokémon, with all of them having varying types, stats, and moves, the Pokémon you get at the beginning of the game is limited and generally the most important ones, especially the starters. Yeah, like the Pokémon gyms that are kinda like the boss battles of the game. Kaminari helpfully pointed it out. All of them specialize in a certain type of Pokémon, like the first gym leader, Brock, being a rock-type specialist in the first game. And the Pokémon that you choose first could make that gym battle easier or harder depending on their types. Momo guessed. Exactly. Kaminari gave a thumbs up. It truly is the end of times if Kaminari of all people is teaching Momo something. Kyoka said seriously. And what better way than with their evolved forms, Boomstick said. Venusaur, the pimply plant monster. Blastoise, the bazooka turtle. And Charizard, the dragon. So, these Pokémon are the final forms of the starter Pokémon you choose? Ida, also a Pokémon virgin, guessed. Yeah, Shui nodded. Most Pokémon can evolve into a new form after reaching a certain level or interacting with a certain stone or unique requirement. And these forms make them stronger. Ida continued asking. Yeah, Uraraka jumped in. When they evolve, their new forms often get greater stat changes, new moves for them to learn. And some even gain a second type to resist more types or make other moves they learn stronger. For a fair assessment, we're examining maxed out wild Pokémon versions of these starters, was explained. For those of you nerdy enough to care, this means no special EV training, no mega evolutions, and no tutor, bred, or otherwise unnaturally learned attacks. So that means they won't be using the strongest TMs for the starters, Izuku muttered, writing that down. TMs? Todoroki questioned. Technical machines, or TMs, are like these discs that help teach Pokémon new moves, some of which they wouldn't naturally learn by level up, Izuku answered, passing his notebook to Todoroki. For example, all of the starters, including Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise, can learn 3 of the most powerful TM moves known as Frenzy Plant, Blast Burn, and Hydro Cannon, but because they won't be able to use those moves, they are limited to their base level-up moves. I see. Todoroki hummed, understanding as he reviewed the Pokémon-related material. And they can only use up to 4 moves at a time. So, a strategic part of this game is deciding on which moves to give your Pokémon to maximize their effectiveness, which varies depending on the Pokémon itself and how you train them. As this all went on, All Might smiled at seeing the students discuss and converse about the game. Hearing a scoff beside him, All Might looked to the displeased Endeavor. I see that you don't approve of young Todoroki getting into Pokémon. All Might stated as a matter of fact. Shoto and the students should focus all of their efforts and time on training, not on some silly games for children. Endeavor scoffed again. Especially with the dark times they may be forced to face. Endeavor kept those words in his mind, recalling the war with the Meta Liberation Army likely on the horizon, a war whose outcome may be determined by these students and how trained up they will be. Rather ironic to be talking about training given the game, don't you think? All Might pointed out cheekily. Endeavor's moment of silence before another scoff was all the indication that he heard and recognized the irony. Yet All Might continued. Perhaps learning and experiencing this game further will teach young Todoroki how to better think of strategizing, maintenance, and the importance of thorough training as well. All might look back down at the students with a fond smile, especially young Midoriya. Besides, they are still kids, Endeavor. All Might reminded the new number one. They may have hard times ahead of them, maybe sooner than we would like, and they will have to bear the load of our mistakes and failures. But that means that the happier times they spend together, their more childish moments, matter more than ever. Don't you agree? Endeavor silently contemplated his former rival's words, and likewise, drifted his gaze down towards the students and to Shoto. Seeing Shoto actually smile as he conversed and talked with Midoriya made Endeavor feel a hammer of realization upon his soul. Shoto never did have much of a regular childhood. He thought grimly, as his memories of Shoto's childhood were of training, resentment, and learning, with little to no actual time spent with his older siblings, especially Tuya, and the closest that his son ever had to normal life was with Rei. Before the incident. And it was all because of him. I robbed him of a normal childhood. Endeavor thought, guiltily, adding another crime on the mountain he had committed against his family. Seeing Shoto smile again with Midoriya, Endeavor's eyes softened. I won't rob him of any happiness anymore. This way, we'll avoid any and all player influence. Wiz finished the explanation. He's Wiz and I'm Boomstick. Boomstick introduced both of them. And it's our job to analyze their weapons, armor, and skills to find out who would win a death battle. Wiz finished the intro. The first Pokémon fighter, in its final evolution, was a large dinosaur-like creature. It stood on all fours, its blue-green skin held multiple pimple-like bumps, mostly on its large, thick arms and legs, each with three-toed claws. For its large head, it had a wide yet short and blunt snout, fangs predominantly on the far ends of its mouth, small, circular red eyes, and small pointed ears with reddish-pink insides. Its most defining feature was the bulb on its back. Opened up, the bulb sides appeared like green fawns, and in the center, supported by a thick, brown trunk, the flower bloomed in white-spotted pink leaves, the center of the flower appearing like a dark hole surrounded by a yellow crown. Venusaur. The first starter Pokémon evolves from Bulbasaur to Ivysaur and finally, to Venusaur, the seed. Pokémon. Wiz introduced the first ever Pokémon, its first evolution, and, finally, the final evolution, an actual fighter. There it is, ladies and germs, the first ever Pokémon, Zero announced, arms raised dramatically. Or at least the one labeled as number 1 on the Pokédex. Jiro pointed out. Becoming uglier and uglier with every form. Boomstick roasted the evolution line. Seriously, what the hell is that thing? Ibera pouted and huffed, not appreciating the shade, as Setsuna refers to it, being thrown onto her chosen starter. It may have not been the first Pokémon she ever chose. That honor belonged to Snivy, from her first ever played game, Pokémon Black. But the Venusaur line was just as dear to her. It appears to look like some sort of dinosaur, with a plant on its back. Ida said that last line questionably. Trust me, kid, compared to all the wacky designs out of the literal thousands of Pokémon, this is tame by comparison. Mount Lady shrugged. Background. Species. The seed Pokémon. Type, grass and poison. Height, 2 meters / 6 feet 7 inches. Weight, 100 kg / 220.5 pounds. Natural habitat, plains, grasslands. Personality, patient, generous, guardian mentality. Statistics, speed 270 average. Attack, 167, below average. Defense, 168 average. Speed attack, 205, above average. Speed defense, 205, above average. Speed, 165 average. Abilities, 1. Overgrow. Increases grass-type moves in a pinch. 2. Chlorophyll. Boosts speed in sunny weather. Of the 3 starters, Venusaur is the most well-rounded and easiest to raise. Wiz continued undeterred. In combat, it relies on its above-average special attack and special defense, or non-physical combat. Essentially, this dinosaur with a tree on its spine is shit at hitting people physically and has to toss magic shit to win. Boomstick crudely summarized. A little crude, but yeah, pretty much. Suka shrugged. Actually, who here picked Venusuar as their starter? Only a couple of hands were raised, the most prevalent of whom were Shiozaki and Midoriya. Why am I not surprised you chose Venusaur, Greenie? Kyoka messed with Midoriya's fluffy verdant hair. The answer is right here, right? Izuku blushed at the touch but still smiled, scratching at his cheek. Well yeah, the color was a bit of a factor, Izuku admitted. But also because Venusaur is arguably the best starter to have in a Kanto playthrough. Those are fighting words, Midobro. Kirishima smirked challengingly, pumping his fists together. Oh, I don't mean to say that choosing Charizard or Blastoise is wrong. Izuku quickly waved his hands, shaking his head rapidly. It's just that the first two gyms in Kanto are Brock and Misty, whose rock and water types are weak to Bulbasaur's grass-type moves, and Squirtle is only super effective against Brock, and Charmander is weak to both. Plus, Venusaur performed generally well against all the other gyms except for Blaine and Sabrina, and also does well against most of the Elite Four. Although Blastoise is quite neutrally good at a lot of the other gyms. Asterisk mutter mutter mutter. Asterisk. You just had to get him started. Bricks for brains. Bakugo face-bombed. Kirishima chuckled nervously. Oh why yeah. Was continued from Boomstick's crude summarization. Pokémon moves are categorized either by physical attacks, special attacks, and status moves. So, the strength behind these attacks depends on the Pokémon's attack and special attack stats, correct? Ida asked. Yeah. Melissa nodded. Though they also vary behind the defense and special defense of the target. And status moves don't do damage but cause some additional effects throughout the battle, like lowering or raising the stats of a Pokémon or inflicting a status effect that causes damage effects over time, like burn or poison, Zero added. Moveset, Tackle, Growl. Lowers opponent's attack stat by 1 stage. Vine Whip. Multipurpose whips, inflict low damage. Razor Leaf. Projectile razor-sharp leaves, can slice through tree trunks. Z-Bump. Petal Blizzard. Strikes multiple targets. Poison Powder. Minus 75% of poisoning target. Leap Powder. Minus 75% of putting a target to sleep. Leech Seed. Slowly absorbs the target's health over time. Synthesis. Uses sunlight to restore 25% of health. Wheat Scent. Decreases target's evasion. Double Edge. Powerful Tackle, 33% recoil damage. Petal Dance. Powerful SP attack. Confuses user after use. Solar Beam. Very powerful beam requires time to charge solar energy. Sunny weather effect charges move faster. And Old Froggy Plant has a variety of all of them. Boomstick continued, showing the move being demonstrated on a mid-air Cyndaquil and a couple of unfortunate trees. Vine Whips for Slap-Pin or Grab-Bin bitches. And Razor Leaf can cut through whole trees. Honestly, the fact that they have leaves that can cut through thick tree trunks makes it weird they don't cut off the limbs of flesh and blood Pokemon, Setsuna said, emphasizing her point by detaching her arm. Ibra's face grew green at the thought, and even the non-bloody visual example, but shook her head, erasing the unfavorable thoughts of blood and gore from one of her favorite Pokemon. Regardless of the explicit violence in a children's video game, Momo stressed that out with a pointed glare at Setsuna and removing her hands from Eri's ears. These moves seem to be more physical in nature and would thus not be as powerful given Venusaur's stats. And you would be right on that, Yaoyorozu. Melissa wrote down the info in Deku's notebook. Both Vine Whip and Razor Leaf are physical grass-type moves, which don't work well with Venusaur's below-average attack stat. Fun fact, Kamui based his lacquered chain prison attack partially on both Vine Whip and Frenzy Plant. Mount Lady whispered to Midnight. Then there's the less action-packed status skills like the irritating Poison Powder and Sleep Powder, which is used to put foes to sleep and take women home from bars. Midnight's brow twitched at the perverse implication regarding her quirk. As much as it hurts to entertain this if it is being discussed here, this Pokémon game must exist out there in the multiverse, and would be irrational not to discuss it. Izawa groaned. And this sleep and poison powder would be useful tools to incapacitate villains, perhaps more versatile than your quirk, Kayama. Fair. Midnight sighed with acceptance. As I recall, Pokémon moves do work on people as well, and sleep powder would affect everyone equally well, whereas my quirk affects men more than women. And that poison powder would be irritatingly effective. Mike jumped in, fake scratching himself. All those villains would just be scratching themselves like a bunch of flea-infested monkeys. Both Izawa and Midnight agreed that, while ridiculous, it would be a rather debilitating attack that would leave the villains vulnerable. If the alternative outcome, that is working like actual poison and poisoning the villains to a slow, agonizing death, was not what would happen. Venusaur's adaptability is its greatest asset, was informed. It can absorb health with leech seed like some kind of jungle vampire, or simply heal on its own by using synthesis. The former move showed Venusaur covering a Squirtle in seeds that grew into tiny plant bulbs that sucked health from it to Venusaur, and the latter move had Venusaur shower in sunlight and heal up. The ability to regenerate itself would be very helpful in a fight, Nizu pointed out. Like the Nomas have shown, regenerating oneself is a powerful tool to wear down its foes while it remains fully healthy. All Might and Endeavor frowned, but agreed with the rodent principle. Their own experiences dealing with rapidly fast and powerful regeneration from the Nomas enough evidence to confirm. However, it cannot use this forever, was pointed out. All Pokémon moves have a certain limit to how many times a move can be used, by the number of power points or pages. Hee pages. Boomstick chuckled childishly. Some of the guys started, mostly Mineta, Kaminari, and Ciro started to snicker and chuckle. Kyoka rolled her eyes, groaning. Sometimes the guys are such childish idiots, Kyoka complained. Okay, most of the time. Ahem. Momo tapped her best friend's shoulder, directing her attention toward two certain pink-skinned and invisible girls that were likewise snickering like their male peers. Often the more useful or powerful the move is, the less PP it dashed. Bahahahaha. Boomstick burst out laughing. Following Boomstick's lead, the students likewise burst out in laughter. Even Kuta was laughing at the joke. Papa, why is PP so funny? Eri tilted her head curiously at Midoriya. Izuku grew pale, mortified at even hearing the words come out of Eri's mouth, much less answering her question. I'll tell you when you are older, Izuku replied, rubbing her head affectionately. Once she was well satisfied by the positive attention of her papa and turned away. Izuku whispered to himself, and hopefully never. So, this self-healing move, Synthesis, has very limited times it can be used? Ida asked. Yep. Shui nodded. From what I remember, it only has 5 pages. I see. Ida hummed. With such a limited number of uses, it must restore quite a bit of its health. This feels rather familiar to our ultimate moves, where we can't use them forever despite how powerful they are. That's a good way to put it. Eureka smiled at the comparison. Usually, those super strong moves are used to ensure victory, just like our ultimate moves do. The fewer power points it has. Wiz sighed and finished the sentence. It also knows Sweet Scent, which aids the poor accuracy of the sleep and poison powders by making the opponent Pokémon less likely to evade. This variety of moves would serve Venusaur well with a stalling battle style. Momo analyzed. It could put its opponent to sleep with sleep powder while draining their health away bit by bit with leech seed, or poison the target with poison powder while repairing any damage with moves like Synthesis. Pair those moves with regular attacking moves like Razor Lead and Wine Whip, and it could prove a menacing threat. Asterisk mutter. Asterisk. Is that what I look like? Izuku's sweat dropped at seeing Momo fall into a muttering state like how he does. Yep. Pretty much. 100%. Now you know how we feel, you nerd. Were among the chorus of replies, the latter of which was obvious to pinpoint who said. Izuku's sweat drop grew larger with his embarrassment. I guess it is a little creepy, huh? Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. Though, Yamamo pulls it off a much cuter than me. Izuku's unintentional compliment broke through the cloud of muttering and into Yairozu's ears. Not only did it snap her from her Izuku-inspired mutterings, but it left the Yairozu heiress blushing bright red. Jesus, and I thought regular Midori was a pretty effective unintentional flirt. Mina pulled at her collar at how hot and bothered this more confident, if not by aphrodisiac side effects, Midori was making her. Izuku then realized the words that came out of his mouth. Eyes widening, blush growing, and hand slapping over his mouth. Shit. Why did I say that out loud? Izuku internally panicked. Now what is she going to think of me? She probably thinks that I'm creepy like Mineta. You are sorry, Yamamo. Izuku apologized. I didn't mean to have that come off as creepy and a dash. No. It's fine, Midori Izuku. Yairozu cut Midoriya's apology, bringing her blush down and smiling, almost openly adoringly at Midoriya. I didn't find it creepy at all. I appreciated the compliment. I am honored that my muttering was just as adorable as your own. Izuku's blush grew 10 times redder, his mouth struggling to form coherent words to Yairozu's delight. I am glad why you think so. Izuku eventually managed to turn away, struggling to not look at Eri, whose eyes dazzled with joyous stars and keep the smile growing on his face down. And there goes the confidence. Mina shook her head, amused. But still cute. Toru giggled at Midoriya's adorable embarrassment. Mineta's eyes narrowed, stoking an imaginary goatee as he thought. First Uraraka, then Melissa, and then Azui and Tokage, and now Yairozu? Mineta counted the girls that Midoriya has flirted with and gained greater success than he ever did. The purple midget was equal parts impressed and jealous. Could this Deku harem that I predicted be even larger than I suspected? But why bother with poisons and powders when you've got a super laser? Boomstick declared, the on-screen Venusaur powering up the move before firing a beam of pure whitish yellow, or pure white energy. Venusaur can absorb so much solar energy that he can fire the iconic grass-type special attack, the Solar Beam. Venusaur! A Venusaur yelled as it fired Solar Beam, blasting it into a Heracross, smashing into a rock, and the single-horn Pokémon collapsed onto the ground, fainted. Ah, what a simply magnifique beam! Oyama declared, posing as usual. When I researched that this would be among its arsenal, it was clear that I would pick Venusaur in my first game. Wait, you researched it ahead of time? Zero questioned, surprised and slightly appalled. What about going in blind and taking it fresh and new? Well, isn't researching kinda better? Kaminari proposed the question. That way you know what to expect, prepare for it better and win more easily. Nah, it's much better to go in blind and come out on top regardless. Kirishima pumped his fist up. Like a real man. But wouldn't researching ahead of time make things less stressful, less likely to run into mistakes and lose? And Sato said before. If you idiots don't stop arguing about this, I'll show you how a Pokémon feels when it faints. Bakuga roared, annoyed past his limit at their arguing. When I find flowers that can do that, I might actually take up gardening. Boomstick joked. Try and pollinate now, bees. That would be terrible. Ibera stood up and declared vehemently. Bees are responsible for providing 1/3 of our food supply, half of the world's fibers, oils, and other raw materials, create medicines, food for wildlife, and prevent soil erosion. Easy, Shio. Down, girl. Setsuna eased the gardener of a classmate down. It's all jokes and good fun. Though you got to admit, they are a little creepy up close and sting like a bitch. Owaze shivered. Actually, bees will rarely sting at you, Koda spoke up. It's only when you provoke them or their hive or kill one of them that they will attack. Wasps are the ones that sting more directly. Yeah, fuck wasps. Kaminari shivered, rubbing his arm. Those bastards hurt like hell. In real life, celestially powered lasers rely on heated magnesium combustion. Wiz analyzed the science, showcasing a solar panel installed machine and the combustions that required energy and heat, such as 4,000 kelvins or 3,726 degrees Celsius. In order to fire, the solar beam's temperature needs to be over 6,700 degrees Fahrenheit. More than likely not just blasting your foe into a boulder, but also burning a hole through them, Boomstick said, using a still image of a Venusaur firing a beam of energy through a seismitoad and creating a hole in the Pokémon. And also the boulder. Impressive, Todoroki muttered, recalling the teachings of his father's flash fire fist and concentrating all his firepower into a more condensed, focused blast. He likewise recalled his attempt at the technique during the joint training class, and how close he was to, unintentionally, turning Tetsu into a melted piece of metal, if not for Hananuki. Unfortunately, the solar beam is so powerful, it takes twice as long to perform as any other attack, was pointed out. And this walking jungle can't just make it sunny with the move Sunny Day, without a TM from a trainer, Boomstick also pointed out. So, unless the skies are looking pretty clear, Venusaur's going to be quite the sitting duck. Or Dino. Sunny Day, Momo questioned. It's a fire-type move that has the Pokémon manipulate the weather and cause the sun to shine harsher during the fight. Kyoka summarized. It usually just makes fire types move stronger, but it also makes moves like Solar Beam charge faster and uses in one turn instead of two. So, Venusaur's most powerful natural move also takes longer to take effect. Momo summarized as well. Unless it is strong and healthy enough to tank an attack, or the enemy is distracted, then Venusaur could leave himself open for a finishing attack. Pros and cons. Effective against fighting water, grass, ground, rock, electric, fairy. Weak against flying, fire, psychic, ice. Pro, diverse move set. Pro, great status affecting moves. Con, little specialization. Con, too few effective SP attacks to justify average stat. As a grass and poison type, Venusaur is extremely effective against water-type Pokémon, was revealed. It also says there that Venusaur is effective against ground and rock types, because they are weak against grass as well, Izuku pointed out. And Venusaur's poison type also makes him strong against fairy and other grass types. So, why is he also effective against fighting and electric? Todoroki asked this time. Because even if a type isn't super strong against a certain type, it can be resisted towards it. Ojiro jumped in. Grass types like Venusaur take half damage from fighting and electric type moves, as well as ground, rock, water, and other grass types. Yeah, it's kind of like how are you going to effectively hurt a plant with another plant? Kaminari pointed out. But keep him away from anything flying, fiery, psychic Y and icy. Boomstick jumped in. Because as we all know, plants freeze and burn, and birds fucking hate grass. Oh, and because psychic energy kills poisons. Okay. Yeah, I also don't know why that is. Mina scratched her head, confused. Some type matchups honestly don't make a bit of sense if you think about it. Yet Venusaur's well-rounded skills and tricky moveset could outsmart and outdrain the competition, was pointed out. Underestimate the first of the starters and you might be in for a world of hurt. Ash Ketchum pulled out his Pokédex and scanned the Pokémon in front of him. Venusaur, the final form of the Bulbasaur evolution. The Kanto Pokédex informed. This seed Pokémon soaks on the sun's rays as a source of energy. The first starter Pokémon garnered a respectable array of positive comments, though most of them seemed to come mainly from those who had chosen the seed Pokémon, and a few more partially complementing its variety and adaptability in combat. Nizu noticed this and foresaw this likely to occur for the other two starters, who both had more instances of popularity than the often overlooked grass starter. The next Pokémon fighter kept a similar reptilian theme as its opponent. The shellfish Pokémon was large, bipedal, and turtle-looking, exemplified by its base body being mostly a large, hard shell, brownish on the back, cream-colored on the front underside, and a white ridge separating the two opposing colors. From its holes poked out its blue arms and legs, standing on two large and thick feet, with 3 claws on the front and 1 on the back, and its thick arms ending off on 3 claws on its hands. Its head was also blue with triangular, black inside, ears, triangularly shaped brown eyes, and a cream-colored jaw. A short, stubby blue tail also poked out from a hole below. But the most prominent feature of this large turtle-like Pokémon was the twin white cannons sticking out from the holes on its shoulders. Blastoise. The second starter Pokémon evolves from Squirtle to Wartortle and finally, to Blastoise, the shellfish Pokémon. Was introduced the next starter, from the blue turtle-like starter to its feathered-looking evolution, to its final stage, the large cannon-attached Pokémon itself. Yeah, now this is my guy right here. Kirishima jumped out and pumped his fists. Bro, same. Tetsu followed in Kirishima's footsteps. I mean, Empoleon is my favorite starter, but Blastoise is a close second. Let me guess, the one and only starter that gained the steel type? Sen whispered the question to Awaze. But the two knew enough of their classmate to know that question was more a statement. As she inspected the Pokémon, while at first confused, something in Yaoyorozu started to find this particular starter more to her liking than Venusaur and the glance of Charizard. So how did this thing come about? Boomstick questioned, the screen showing a curtain opening and detailing Boomstick's made-up story. Did a turtle get really drunk one night and then come across a tank and was like, "Hey, I'll put my dick in that." Then 9 months later, the tank showed up at his door and was like, "Boom, this is yours." And then he raised it out of shame until one day it evolved. And all the other turtles were like, "That's fucking awesome." So then they all started plowing tanks. Suri, why not? Was said, annoyance and irritation leaking out of his defeated, sarcastic voice. Did that little monologue ruin the starter for you? Kamakiri snickered. Nope. Kirishima and Tetsu shook their heads vehemently, continuing to gaze at their chosen starter fondly. Background. Species. The shellfish Pokémon. Type water. Height. 1.6 meters / 5 feet 3 inches. Weight. 85.5 kg / 188.5 pounds. Natural habitat. Lakes, islands. Personality. Stubborn, solitary warrior mentality. Statistics. HP 260 average. Attack. 171, below average. Defense. 205 average. SP attack. 215 average. SP defense. 193, above average. Speed. 161 average. Abilities. 1. Torrent. Increases water type moves in a pinch. 2. Rain dish. Recovers health in rain. Blastoise firmly boasts defense over offense, using his weighty bulk to outlast and overpower foes. Wiz began. Like a stone firm upon the shore. He can take wave after wave of punishment. So, Venusaur is the adaptive, versatile one. Blastoise here is the defensive tank. And I'm guessing Charizard will likely be the more offensive member of the trio? Todoroki asked. Yeah, actually. Mirio nodded. You sure you haven't played this game already? As poetic as that was, he won't be winning any marathons. Boomstick jumped in. He's almost as slow as a tortoise, which makes sense, unlike the giant guns sticking out of his back. Ignoring Boomstick's nonsensical monologue from before, how does such a creature evolve to bear what looks like water pressure cannons inside its body? Ida steadied his glasses as he tried to figure out the biology of Blastoise. Say it with me, kids, magic. Kyoka declared, Eri and Kuta following suit and copying her wavy hands. Also, why the hell is it called the shellfish Pokémon? Boomstick continued his confused rant. I may not be the smartest tool in Boomshed, but even I know this looks like a turtle, not a clam. Boomstick emphasized his point by comparing a picture of Blastoise with an actual turtle and a clam. What do you say, Koda? Sato turned to his classmate. Is Boomstick correct there? Yes, actually. Koda nodded, pleasantly impressed with Boomstick. The marine animals that would qualify as shellfish are usually crustaceans and mollusks. Think shrimp, lobsters, crabs, oysters, snails, scallops and squid. Blastoise is more of a tortoise based on its size, but closer than most to turtles given its aquatic nature. And that was zoology with Professor Koda, kids. More at 11. Next up, fun times with the Nerd Brigade. Kaminari imitated a reporter, much to the kids' laughter and Koda's blushing embarrassment. Moveset: Tackle, Tail Whip. Lowers opponent's defense stat. Earn defense. Drastically increases defense stat. Rapid Spin. Can clear ground hazards like spikes and attached effects like Leech Seed and Wrap. Protect. Shields from all shields. Flash Cannon. Minus 10% flinch target. Gullbash. Requires time to charge up power. Water Gun. Water Pulse. May confuse the target. Putail. Bubble. May lower the target's speed. Rain Dance. Creates rainfall, which increases water-type moves by 50%. Lowers fire-type moves by 50%. Hydro Pump. Ultra-powerful water cannon with an 80% hit rate. Can punch through metal. Blastoise can significantly reduce incoming damage with iron defense, barrel through hazards and remove attached ones with rapid spin, and guard against any and all attacks with protect. Was listed. Blastoise was shown performing the mentioned moves. Blastoise can increase its already high defenses to tank more and more attacks, especially from Venusaur, who Blastoise is weak against, and even cancel more dangerous attacks like Solar Beam with Protect. Melissa wrote down her findings. Plus, Rapid Spin could also have Leech Seed removed to keep its health drained over time by Venusaur. And if they are going to have them fight more fluidly like the anime or Pikachu vs Blanca, then Blastoise could also use Rapid Spin to help evade attacks that would normally hit it because of its slow speed. Shui pointed out. Unfortunately, he can't keep using Protect forever, Izuku added, because of the number of times the move can be used. Momo guessed. Partially, Izuku nodded. But the main reason is that once a Pokémon uses Protect, it's very unlikely for it to be able to use it the next turn. It's sort of like a cooldown and game balancing thing, otherwise, people would just spam it in fights. He can chomp foes with Bite, which has a chance of flinching the target, and crack heads with Skull Bash, which also takes time to build up. But most of his arsenal focuses on water power, blasting foes with Water Gun, Water Pulse, Aqua Tail and Bubbles. Boomstick declared dramatically on the last move. Again magic, Kyoka said before Ida could ask. The blue-haired teen lowering his hand. What is flinching though? Momo asked. It's a secondary effect of some moves where they have a low to medium chance to cause the Pokémon to not attack that turn, Izuku answered. Although, it usually is an effect that works with faster Pokémon to catch the target off guard and keep them from attacking after you, which wouldn't work well with Blastoise given that he is slower than both Venusaur and Charizard. Uraraka finished Deku's statement. But despite its lack of attack-type diversity, Blastoise can maximize its watery weaponry with Rain Dance, a rainstorm that amplifies water-type moves and blocks out the sun. Wiz introduced the weather-changing move. Not only would that be detrimental for Venusaur's Solar Beam, but Blastoise would benefit it with its hidden ability. Izuku muttered. Hidden ability? Ida questioned. A Pokémon's ability is a secret weapon where it helps the Pokémon in battle outside of its attacks, Setsuna informed. Some abilities can keep their stats from dropping, and others can be activated upon a certain circumstance. And hidden abilities are like super, ultra-rare abilities that very few of their species can have. Melissa jumped in. And Blastoise's hidden ability, known as Rain Dish, can restore Blastoise's health when exposed to rain. So, it's like Venusaur's Leech Seed and Synthesis, but not only would it only activate by rain, but also be a detriment to Venusaur's most powerful move. Ida summarized. Quite an effective strategy. But his ultimate attack is Hydro Pump, where he blasts water out of his twin cannons with enough force to accurately punch through steel at a range of 160 feet. Boomstick detailed. Punch through steel. Jirota raised an eyebrow at the level of power of the move. High-pressure water jet cutters are used industrially to cut through metal with at least 55,000 psi or pounds per square inch, was informed. A water jet cutter shown on screen, for example. By measuring Blastoise's cannons in comparison to his size, we can tell his hydro pump has a power of 90,000 psi. That'll get the stains off your patio, Boomstick exclaimed humorously. Along with your patio and possibly house. Yep, and us. Kirishima sweat dropped alongside Tetsu. Still awesome though. Pros and cons. Effective against steel, fire, ground, rock, water, ice. Weak against grass, electric. Pro. Great defensive potential. Pro can shoot through steel. Con. Lacks options for attacks. Con. Not very fast or mobile. Blastoise is effective against fire-type Pokémon, but weak to grass and electric. Was highlighted. So, water puts out fire and fire burns grass and plants, obvious enough. Mount Lady said. But why is grass super effective against water? Grass and plants absorb water into its systems for nourishment, so it can be argued that firing water-type attacks on a grass type is so weak because the grass types are getting more nourished by it than harmed, Tiger answered. And in reverse, grass-type attacks must hurt water types a lot because the plant-based moves are absorbing the water from the water-type Pokémon. Mandalay joined in. I'm guessing water is also effective against ground and rock because of erosion, and steel and ice because of what they stated previously on water cutting through steel. Momo inquired. Well, you're half right, Yamamoto. Mina replied, her hand motioning in a so-and-so manner. Water is super effective against rock and ground, but water is only resistive towards steel and ice. Huh! Momo blinked confused. But what about Dash? Like Psychic being strong against poison, Yamamoto. Some type matchups don't make a lot of sense in retrospect, Toru pointed out. At least in this, steel doesn't do a lot against water types and ice is just frozen water. Kyoka shrugged. So, it kinda makes a little sense. And when he's not battling, Blastoise can be found training on secluded islands to strengthen his combat skills. Boomstick pointed out. Excellent. Shot nodded. A fine warrior sharpens what he knows best and improves and strengthens what it lacks. Where do you get this sage crap? Sun Tzu's Art of War. Miruko snickered at her joke. If it plays its defenses right, Blastoise just might outlast everyone, was stated. Ash once again scanned the final starter Evo. Blastoise's strength lies in its power, rather than its speed. The Pokédex informed. Its shell is like armor, and attacks from the hydro cannons on its back are virtually unstoppable. While the Pokémon had some respectable favor like the previous one, those who valued the phrase, the best defense is a good defense, found Blastoise the more favorable option, along with its design and power, especially from the Pokémon's known choosers, such as Kirishima and Tetsu. The final Pokémon combatant was perhaps the most aesthetically pleasing for most of the group, as befits its popularity compared to its fellow starters. The predominantly orange-colored Pokémon was draconic in appearance, standing bipedal on stocky legs, also with 3 clawed toes. Its cream-colored belly was robust, contrasting to its short and skinny arms, each limb complemented by 3 white claws. 2 wings sprouted from its back, a single wing finger visible from the center of each wing membrane, its undersides colored blue-green. It holds a long orange neck, its head rectangular, 2 horn-like structures protruding from the back of it. Its snout ended on slightly raised nostrils and 2 visibly protruding fangs on its upper jaw, and had small blue eyes. It lived up to its name as the flame Pokémon by its long tail, the underside also cream-colored, and ended on a constantly alit yellow and red flame. Charizard. The final starter Pokémon evolves from Charmander to Charmeleon, and finally to Charizard, the flame Pokémon, was announced the final starter of the Kanto starter trio. I would so ride that into battle, Boomstick admitted excitingly. And by far one of the most popular Pokémon ever, Zero admitted. Well yeah, Charizard is awesome, Kaminari declared excited. He looks cool and he's super strong and fast. Meh, a little overrated really. Mineta shrugged, uninterested. Especially since he's technically the worst starter to choose, as Midoriya said. Is he really? Momo asked Izuku. Strategically, I guess, Izuku admitted, rubbing his neck. The first two gyms of the Kanto region that Charizard is from are Rock and Water type, which are very strong against Charmander, who's supposed to be your strongest Pokémon. So, while this starter is aesthetically appealing, in execution he would put you at a disadvantage. Ida summarized. That is something you kids should know by now, Aizawa spoke up. Just because something looks flashy or cool doesn't mean it is the best or flawless. As heroes, we are protectors of the people and have to focus on being as efficient as possible, or risk losing lives because someone wanted to look popular. Aizawa's words struck a deep chord among two specific people in the crowd. Mount Lady flinched hard at how true Aizawa's words stung when looking back at her debut. She recalled one of the first times she ever met her now teammate, Edgeshot, before they formed their team, the Lurkers. He had reviewed the major incidents during her debut day, most especially the sludge villain incident, and criticized how she handled the situation, focusing on staying in her giant form and failing to get inside the alleyway where the sludge villain was attacking, rather than shrinking down to fit in the alleyway and regrow from there. She remembered how bitter and embarrassing it felt to hear that from the now number 4 hero, but the negative feelings were more towards herself at how simple a solution it sounded, making how utterly useless she was that the verdant-haired teen sitting rows below her was able to do more than a full-on pro like her. Kamui had defended her by claiming she ultimately kept the civilians on her side of the alleyway safe, from both the sludge villain and All Might's Detroit Smash's fierce winds, but Mount Lady had accepted and acknowledged her mistake, the words from her senior the finishing blow to her fame-hungry ego that was whittling down ever since then. Fortunately, accepting her flaws and acknowledging to improve herself was what ultimately had the Lurkers team form in the first place. Edgeshot had responded by acknowledging her newfound humbleness and pointed out her positive traits as a heroine, ones that could overtake her flaws and could lead her to be a great heroine. Edgeshot offered to help see that through and to do the same with Kamui Woods, as partners in a team, and the rest was history. And now hearing the words from Aizawa as well as the previous video with Spider-Man, Mount Lady resolved again to continue improving herself from the mistakes of the past. The other person Aizawa's words hit close to home was All Might himself. Aizawa's words about the flashy not translating to flawless felt like a dig at the symbol of peace. Widely believed flawless, unstoppable, unfailing hero, the best of the best. But in more recent years, evidence was to the contrary. The praise of society and the power of one for all went to his head, and it ended up losing him his stomach, half his respiratory system, and the beginning of his decline as the symbol. His smile his mentor taught him to always hold became a facsimile to hide his own fear and lost the true meaning his mentor tried to teach him, one of the many hypocrisies that blinded him to the point he almost turned away his now successor and surrogate son back on that fateful day. And now with his retirement and absence, the flaws of hero society that he and others left unanswered festered and grew to the rise of villainy and criminals, most especially the League, their Nomu and Shigaraki. Now, however, with his duty to train the next generation of heroes, including his successor, Izuku Midoriya, All Might hoped to make this generation better than anything he could ever have done alone, and that Midoriya would learn from the mistakes of this old man. Background: Species: the Flame Pokémon. Type: Fire and Flying. Height: 1.7 meters / 5 feet 7 inches. Weight: 98.5 kg / 199.5 pounds. Natural habitat: mountains, valleys, volcanoes. Personality: aggressive, prideful, warrior mentality. Well, that could be tough, was replied. A full-grown Charizard is only 5 foot 7 inches tall. What? That's bullshit, Boomstick yelled, unhappy. I wanna ride a dragon to burn the villages of my enemies, not hang out with it on the sofa. Wait, haven't we seen Charizards in the anime taller than that? Cozy Eye questioned. Like Ash rode on his awesome Charizard multiple times. You do remember that Ash was still a 10-year-old kid, right? Kamakiri asked back. Well, you could ride on a Charizard if it was a particularly large one, like an alpha one, Shoda pointed out. Statistics: HP 266, average. Attack: 173, below average. Defense: 161, below average. SP attack: 223, above average. SP defense: 175 average. Speed 205 above average. Abilities 1. Blaze. Increases fire type moves in a pinch. 2. Solar power. Raises SP attack in sunny weather but drains health. Despite its size, Charizard is extremely fast and extremely powerful. Wiz continued onwards. Its speed and special attack eclipse the other two starters twice over, the trade-off being unfortunate frailty. But since he can fly, it's pretty hard to get a hold of him, Boomstick said. Well, you were right that Charizard is the offensive one of the three, Todoroki. Ojiro bumped his elbow on the scarred team. And a speedy one at that. Todoroki nodded, paying full attention to the fiery dragon-like Pokémon. Endeavor likewise paid attention to the flame Pokémon, for obvious reasons. Actually, unlike his fellow starters, Charizard also possesses two different Mega Evolutions, unlike the singular one that the others have. Was pointed out, showing both the black and blue, and actually Dragon-type Mega Charizard X and the more similar to base form Mega Charizard Y, and comparing it to the singular Mega Evolutions of Venusaur and Blastoise, one of which made the dragon-looking fire type actually a dragon type. Ah, classic corporate favoritism, Boomstick bluntly stated. Mega Evolutions. Momo questioned for what felt like the 100th time, to her shame. They are like extra but temporary evolved states that certain Pokémon can achieve if it both holds a special stone unique to that Pokémon and it has a trusted bond with their trainer, Melissa answered. It only lasts for the duration of a battle, but the Mega Evolved Pokémon become incredibly strong. Overpowered really, Kyoka stated. Some were pretty broken like Mega Gengar and Lucario. Honestly, they should have made Charizard Dragon-type to begin with, Bakugo grumbled. It looks like a dragon and knows a lot of Dragon-type moves. That wouldn't be fair for gameplay balancing, Kaken. Izuku sighed, trying to explain a point to his childhood friend that he had tried for a literal decade. Dragon resists fire, grass, and water, and giving that to Charizard would have made him neutral against Blastoise instead of weak, and would ruin the grass-fire-water trio relationship. So what? Bakugo retorted back. Charizard is still cooler. Plus, that flying type only makes it 4x stronger than your plant dinosaur, Shitty Deku. Moveset, Scratch, Growl. Lowers opponent's attack stat. Smokescreen. Lowers target's accuracy by 1 stage. Dragon Rage. Normal type move with increased critical hit chance. Dragon Claw. Shadow Claw. Ghost type move with increased critical hit chance. Slut. Minus 30% of target flinching. Wing Attack. Dragon Breath. Fire Fang. Heat Wave. Fire Spin. Traps target in a vortex of fire for damage every turn. Flare Blitz. Powerful flaming tackle. Deals 33% recoil damage. Flame Burst. Burns surrounding area. Hits multiple targets. Flamethrower. Powerful fire stream. May burn target. Can melt boulders. Charizard's moveset is incredibly diverse, ranging from the obvious fire breath to flying, dragon, and even ghost-type attacks, was stated. Quite the opposite of Blastoise's lack of attack diversity, Ryukyu noted. Nice. Maruko smirked. I already like this thing with the looks, speed, and attack power, but that just sealed the deal for me. Offensive is the best defense. Turning to look at Ryukyu beside her, giving her a raised eyebrow, Maruko scoffed. Oh please, like you were not going to vote for it because it is a flying, fire-breathing dragon in all but type. Ryukyu was silent before she replied with, Touché. At close range, he'll always have an edge up by using either Slash, Dragon Claw, or Shadow Claw, most of which have a chance of critical effect. Boomstick had listed while Charizard performed said moves. He can strike from above with Wing Attack or Air Slash, with a 30% chance of flinching the target. But his real strength lies in the flames. He'll burn and bite you with Fire Fang, trap you in a vortex of embers with Fire Spin, smash you apart with Flare Blitz Dash, at the cost of self-inflicted recoil damage. Wiz interrupted. Just like Pikachu's Volt Tackle from his fight, Todoroki pointed out. It must exude enough firepower that it's too much for its own body to handle. And of course, burn you to cinders with Flame Burst or Flamethrower. Boomstick ended with the iconic Fire-type attack. Charizard can reportedly burn through solid stone. Was analyzed. This means his Flamethrower reaches temperatures over 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. Impressive. Endeavor made a huff of acknowledgement, ignoring the cheeky grins from All Might and Miruko. And Flame Burst and Heat Wave are also very good. Izuku jumped in. Flame Burst and Heat Wave can actually attack multiple targets, so it would be perfect in a battle royal to attack both Venusaur and Blastoise. Only bad thing is that even if it could, Flame Burst won't hurt Blastoise much, Mirio pointed out. And despite Charizard having a lot of moves, only the flying and fire-type ones will get the stab bonus from it. Charizards are aggressive and warrior-like, and will actively seek fights with stronger opponents, Boomstick stated, a Charizard walking up to an even larger one and firing a stream of fire directly onto its face. Yep, that will do it. Kamakiri snickered. Pros and cons. Effective against Grass, Bug, Fighting, Steel, Fairy, Ice. Weak against Rock, Water, Electric. Pro. Great speed and maneuverability. Pro. Immune to ground-type attacks. Con. Frail defense. Con. Difficult to raise and control. The fire and flying type combination makes Charizard doubly effective against grass Pokémon, like Venusaur, but weak to water types like Blastoise, was reported. Ah, so 3 starters are strong and weak towards one of the others, like rock, paper, scissors. Momo deduced. Yep. Mina nodded. And in the older games, your rival chooses the one that is stronger than the starter you choose. Yeah, that was nerve-wracking. Toru wiped her invisible forehead. Then they made the rivals choose the one that is weaker than yours instead. Which was so dumb. Bakugo roared out his opinion. At least those older rivals gave you a challenge. Now, most of them are just weak-ass pansies that are all goody-goody extras. I liked Nimona. Kaminari shrugged. She was lively and battle-hungry, which was kinda funny, if not a little clingy. Are you sure it wasn't because she was a hot chick? Mineta asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, how dare you, good sir? Kaminari gasped dramatically. I know that you speak your perverted mind all you want, but that is just sexist of you to believe that my reason for liking a character is because she is cute. I am deeply and profoundly of Dash. Mineta's raised eyebrow only grew wider, crossing his arms for extra skepticism. Okay, maybe a little bit because she is cute, but only a little. Isn't she like 14 or 15 or something? Ciro asked, a little weirded out. Dude, did you forget that almost all of us are like 16 or 17 by now? Kaminari questioned back. I mean, if our upperclassman Hado of 2 years can have the hots for Midoriya, I think me saying a 15-year-old is cute is allowed. Wait, what do you mean Hado has the hots for Midoriya? Mineta whispered, alarmed/intrigued. Dude, is it not obvious by now? Kaminari looked at Mineta with surprise that he hadn't figured it out by now. She has been smashing her boobs into Midoriya's face every chance she gets and went on a long rant defending Midoriya for being a cute bunny, to Miruko of all people. Hell, I won't be surprised if half the girls of both classes don't have a thing for that unintentional Casanova. Mineta's eyes widened in fascination and horror. Mineta slowly moved his head, almost like a rusty robot towards Midoriya as he talked with Yorozu and Melissa, and all 3 of them blushed at each other. The legends are true. The harem king exists. Mineta thought, overtly dramatic, as he wept in awe and despair. If it spends too much time in a heavy rainstorm, its flame will go out. Permanently. Wiz grimly stated, showing a weak and wet Charizard with a dwindling flame tail. Oh dear. Momo gasped horrified. Yeah, forgot about that, Kyoka said. When the flame on Charizard's tail, or any of its line, goes out, then they are pretty much dead. Something that could likely happen if Blastoise uses Rain Dance, Shinso said grimly. But he's so fast and deadly. He might just overpower his enemies before they know what hit him, Boomstick warned. And if you piss one out in the wild, may God have mercy on your crispy soul. Charizard, the Flame Pokémon. Ash's Pokédex scanned the last of the Kanto starter trio. When competing in intense battles, Charizard's flame becomes more intense as well. Alright, the combatants are set, Wiz stated. Let's end this debate once and for all. It's time for a death battle with the Pokémon, Boomstick shouted. Ha, I'm kinda liking that drawn-out battle cry. Setsuna snickered. Before the group could go on to start voting for their voting fighters, expecting the machine to pause and take a while to find counterparts, the device spoke up immediately with, "Multiversal counterparts unverifiable." That was fast. Sin blinked in surprise. What do you mean unverifiable? Melissa asked, sharing her confusion with the rest of the group. Video combatants based on simulated example of a typical species of Pokémon. The device answered, showing all 3 starters with big red XS in front of them. Combatants too generic and without individuality to register specific counterparts. In less technical terms. Tetsu scratched his head at the words. It is saying the same thing with the Terminator from the previous fight. May translated. The 3 Pokémon fighting are just random examples or simulated ones of their species, like how the Terminator in its fight was just a random model. May's right. Melissa nodded. Remember that in Pikachu's fight, they specifically referred it to be Ash's Pikachu, a specific Pikachu among the hundreds of others, and was able to put a counterpart to it. Well, that's disappointing. Kirishima Moped. Slightly hopeful that he would have been Blastoise given that he shared a similar defensive trait to the shellfish Pokémon. Sometimes we create our own heartbreaks through expectations, Tokoyami sagely said. Tokoyami fought off a pleased grin when he spotted Reiko shivering and blushing in response. Very pointedly told, Mr. Tokoyami. Nizu spoke up. Ms. Hatsum, if you please. Pause the video so we can finish our fun voting process. With the video paused, the voting among the group began again. In the end, many of the votes were, unsurprisingly, chosen by personal bias on those that had chosen a particular starter, but few managed to vote on partial judgment and neutrality. Though given most of the few were those with no interest in Pokémon like Endeavor, or haven't been exposed to it as much as the others, like Momo, Todoroki, and Ida, that wasn't saying much. Among the voters for Venusaur, the most obvious of them were Shiozaki and Midoriya, the former of whom was the most biased of the two, and the latter was at least confident and hopeful in Venusaur's adaptability and versatile arsenal. Setsuna would also vote for the plant dinosaur, partially on that it was a dinosaur that was green but also liking its regenerative capabilities. Those sentiments about its regeneration powers were likewise shared with Ida, who also voted for Venusaur's various status-inflicting abilities and long-ranged weaponry, Amajiki, who liked Venusaur's vine whips and underdog status among the starters, and Kinoko, who voted on the most plant-like of starters, always imagining the plant growing on its back like a giant mushroom, like Paras and Parasect, though less mind-controlling. Aoyama would also vote for the seed Pokémon based on its powerful solar beam like his own naval laser. Blastoise's most notable voters included the hardhead duo of Kirishima and Tetsu, the two obviously voting for one of their favorite starters with impressive defenses and hardening capabilities. Hirozu would also be found voting for the shellfish Pokémon based on its defenses, small yet effective moves. And not at all because she liked the cannons on its shell-like Kyoka and, surprisingly or maybe not given his aphrodisiac side-affected state Midoriya teased her about. Mirio and All Might would vote for the constantly improving Pokémon with the effective blend of long-range power and defense. Koda, mostly on how fond he was of the starter most resembling an actual animal species, sans the water cannons, and Kuda, who liked Blastoise's looks and water power. Charizard, unsurprisingly, had a lot of voters, the most notable of which included Bakugo and Kaminari, the two avid fanboys of the fierce, draconic Pokémon, the former especially because of its firepower and speedy attacker status. Speaking of fire, Todoroki and Endeavor would also vote for the flame Pokémon, mostly on the fire side for the elder Todoroki and the younger more on the speed and various offensive moves. Nijire Miruko and Ryukyu all also voted for the dragon-like fire/flying type. Hado for its fast speed and projectile firepower, Miruko also on the speed stats and attack stats, and Ryukyu because, as Miruko said, it was Fiery Dragon, and one she still remembers fondly picking in her first game. Finally, with all the voting over, and some actual monetary bets among the students settled discreetly, Mayon paused the video, and the death battle soon began to play. The video began playing in a forest clearing, a wild Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charmander all sitting around happily, while the Pokémon Center music played in the background. Ah! Uraraka pleasantly sighed. I always liked hearing that theme in the games. It is quite soothing. Melissa agreed with Uraraka. Suddenly, a claw-like machine appeared out of nowhere above the starters. In a flash, it opened up and dropped down a massive number of rare candies, covering up the 3 starter Pokémon. Well, that was random. Setsuna blinked, surprised. What are those blue candies supposed to do? Momo asked. They're rare candies, Izuku answered. They are special blue treats that when you give them to one of your Pokémon, it will evolve by 1 level. They must be eating the rare candies so they can both evolve into their final stages and reach the max level of 100. And theoretically, if all 3 of them are at level 1, then there must be at least 300 rare candies in that pile. Ectoplasm calculated the number of candies. For a brief moment, nothing transpired, until sudden bright lights start emanating from the pile of level-increasing sweets. Eventually, an explosion of light occurred, knocking away all the leftover rare candies or empty wrappings. The light faded to reveal the 3 new, fully evolved, maxed-out final stages of the 3 starters: Venusaur, Blastoise, and Charizard. Oh boy, here we go. Kirishima rubbed his hands together, practically unable to contain his excitement. Fight! Immediately, Charizard leaped straight up into the air. After an aerial donut, the flame Pokémon turned around and charged at Blastoise at high speeds, hitting through the turtle with Slash, blood sprouting out while Blastoise gritted its teeth in pain. Just like they said, Charizard is very aggressive and fast, so it makes sense that it would make the first move, Ryukyu noted. Starting strong and against its biggest threat. Now that's what I'm talking about. Miruko grinned, approving of Charizard's decision. Blastoise made a short jump before tucking its head and appendages into its shell, using Withdraw, followed up with Iron Defense, evidenced by the brief metallic scale design around the shell, an overhead indicator showing its defenses were raised. And Blastoise is immediately going on the defensive on Charizard, targeting it, using 2 defense-raising moves back-to-back. Fat Gum nodded. Charizard came back, trying to attack Blastoise again, but bounced feebly off the hardened shell. It tried to attack again with several repeated slashes and strikes and even a flamethrower, all to no effect. With Blastoise's raised defenses by 2 stages, then Charizard's physical slashes wouldn't do much damage. Izuku began analyzing the fight. And even if uses Flamethrower, which has both a stab boost for the Fire-type move and because its special attack is higher, it wouldn't hurt Blastoise much at all because it's a Water-type. And Charizard is putting so much focus on Blastoise that Venusaur is just standing there doing nothing. Mirio chuckled. Well, that is a good thing, Ibra commented. If Charizard and Blastoise keep their fight to each other, then whoever comes out the victor could be defeated by a fully intact Venusaur. Venusaur then decided to join the fray, attacking both Pokémon with Razor Leaf. The leaves almost bounced harmlessly off Blastoise's shell, but the flinching Charizard evidently took some damage. Had to jinx us, Hashio. Setsuna raised an eyebrow towards her sweat-dropping friend. At least, it doesn't do much to Charizard because it's both fire and flying type, both of which resist grass-type moves. Nijire pointed out. And Blastoise's raised defenses again help well, because those razor leaves would have been super effective against him. Kirishima smiled. Momentarily, ignoring the plant dinosaur, Charizard picked up Blastoise and flew into the air with it, before proceeding to throw the water type to the ground. Blastoise sailed through the air, using rapid spin as well, and struck Venusaur, hitting him head-on. Would that count as a seismic toss? Kominari asked. Normally, Charizards don't learn seismic toss in games, though Ash's Charizard did learn it in the anime, Koda answered. Bouncing and jumping away from the seed Pokémon, Blastoise finally came out of its shell, attacking Venusaur again with a skull bash, knocking the plant dinosaur back a bit. Charizard roared as its body was engulfed in the flames of Flare Blitz, rushing towards Blastoise. The shellfish Pokémon easily caught the flying lizard's attack, the two now locked in an even power struggle. "You idiot flying salamander!" Bakuga roared his displeasure. "Don't hit him. Hit the walking tree. Are you really that desperate for your fighter to cook Midoriyas?" Zero asked. "Zip it, tape arms." Bakuga yelled back in reply. It's obvious that Charizard should have it Venusaur with Flare Blitz because of Blastoise's defenses against it. Flare Blitz is a physical fire-type move that would have already done jackshit on a water-type like Blastoise, but its raised defenses make its high damage just pathetic. And it does recoil damage, so it hurt itself more than Blastoise. Plus, that fire-type move would have done crazy damage on Venusaur because of its grass typing, Kirishima pointed out as well. Behind them, Venusaur glowed yellow, using synthesis to heal himself. Then, glowing yellow again, it unleashed an enveloping field of pinkish spores all over the field. Sweet scent, indicating lowering its opponent's evasion by an overhead indicator highlighting its increased accuracy. Smart, Izawa nodded. While the two struggle against each other and keep their attention on themselves, Venusaur took the opportunity to health back up its lost health from Blastoise and Charizard's attacks and lower the evasion of the two, making Venusaur's attacks more likely to hit. Charizard and Blastoise stopped their battle, questioning marks over their heads to non-verbally wonder what was happening. Venusaur then exploded out purple powder all across them. Resisting, Charizard quickly flew up to avoid the powder just before it took complete effect, and Blastoise retreated back into its shell, using a second iron defense before succumbing to the effects of the powder and falling asleep. So, that must have been the move Sleep Powder, and because it had low accuracy, it used Sweet Scent before so it could have mitigated that low accuracy. Ida began deducing. But with Charizard's speed, it was still able to fly away before it could work. But Blastoise couldn't, so it instead pulled out a final iron defense to raise its defenses while asleep. Have I gotten that correctly? Yes, you did, Ida. Uraraka cheerfully patted one of her best friends. You're learning. Indeed you are. Very impressive deduction skills on a subject that you are only just learning, Mr. Ida. Nizu clapped his paws for the youngest son of the Ida family. If this were a graded assignment, I would give you full marks. Ida was taken aback by the sudden praise but steeled himself and bowed. Thank you, sir. Ida whimpered out, trying and failing to keep the pride and accomplishment out of his tone. Venusaur targeted the fleeing Charizard, tossing out a vine whip to catch the large lizard by the tail and hold him still. Venusaur began to glow yellow, rays of sunshine gathering into it as it hummed with power. It's using solar beam, Oyama declared, shining particularly brighter. With a mighty roar, the fire-slash-flying Pokémon escaped from the vine whip's grasp, but instead of fleeing, it began flying straight for Venusaur. No, no, no. Get away from it. Shoo. Kaminari panicked. Charizard is far too stubborn a warrior to flee from a straight fight with Venusaur, Tokoyami said. It would prefer to fight against Venusaur's attack head-on rather than flee to safety. But before it could get to the grass-slash-poison type, Venusaur finished charging and fired the solar beam at Charizard, who quickly retaliated with a powerful flamethrower. The two attacks collided, both equally powerful, and Charizard advanced slowly toward the beam's struggle. The attacks continued to go on for a short bit, but suddenly, the attacks created a huge explosion, engulfing the screen in white light, before fading to black. Wait, what just happened? Nina lowered her arms from covering her eyes, now staring at a black screen. Is that it? Doubtful. Kyoka rubbed her eyes from the bright light. I think it's just about to get very interesting. Soon enough, color returned to the screen, now showing the environment as a complete scorched wasteland. Well, that forest has gone bye-bye. Setsuna stared blankly at the results of the attacks. How dare that flying lizard eviscerated such a beautiful, lush, and plentiful forest? Ibra raged vehemently. Ha! How is this Charizard's fault? Bakugo roared back, a comical tick mark over his head. If anything, it's that walking tree frog that went scorched earth on that forest. How dare you? That non-dragon salamander was clearly at fault. Ibera gained her own angry tick marks over her head and glowing red eyes. The explosion clearly occurred because it inched closer and built up the energy to explode. What kind of dumbass logic is that? Bakugo raged back as vehemently. That explosion was clearly because stored energy from the sun met with dragon fire. That wasn't even actual dragon fire. It was just regular Pokémon fire. You barking Pomeranian. Ibera barked out. The hell you call me, you holy chia pet? Bakugo roared back. The two growled at each other like a pair of dogs, before they were suddenly wrapped in a gray scarf. Enough the both of you, Izuku growled out himself. His tone and glowing eyes cutting off the two's growling and subconsciously activating quirks. Now out of their rage, the two realized that their faces were in fact practically inches from each other, unknowingly walking closer together in their rants. The sudden approximation to each other had to be taken back and blushing. I already warned you before about antagonizing other students, Bakugo. Izuku reminded the ash blonde teen. Detention. I will see to the specifics tomorrow. Shiozaki, I will let Vlad deal with you. Izuku released them, both of them walking silently back to their seats. Bakugo ignored the stares of his classmates, especially the teasing grins of Mina, likely Hagakure, Kirishima, and Kaminari. As he sat down, ignoring them, hand over his mouth. He fought to keep down the blush he tried to cover, though with one thought in his head. Did she always smell so nice? Bakugo wondered, the scent of her hair, like that of a fresh, aroma-filled flower. Meanwhile, with Shiozaki, she was in a similar state, ignoring the teasing stare of Setsuna and the angry, chastising words of Vlad King, focusing on a thought that repeated like a track in her mind. Were his eyes always that beautiful? Shiozaki pondered, thinking about his ruby-red eyes, so deep and thick like blood-made flesh. Venusaur stood in the middle of the wasteland, surrounded by dust, making it hard for the grass starter to see. Venusaur looked around to see where its opponents have gone. Suddenly, it made out a vague shape before, out of the dust. Charizard flew right towards it, its wing glowing white from wing attack. The wing attack struck straight, true, and through Venusaur's flower-like appendage. The flower sliced off as the seed Pokémon roared in pain. Screams and yelps of surprise and horror came out of the students at the sudden gruesome sight. Yeah, that's not what happens in Pokémon, Kinoko muttered weakly, already knowing just what was going to happen. Charizard retreated back after completely cutting through the seed Pokémon's flower. Flames gathered in its jaw before firing a flame burst. It exploded onto its target, surrounding Venusaur in a field of flames. The plant monster roars as it tried and failed twice to escape the flames, letting out a final roar into the air before ultimately perishing. Groans and sighs of defeat and disappointment were shared among the Venusaur voters, while most of the Charizard voters cheered in victory. I feel like something is missing, but I can't quite put my finger on it, Kaminari muttered. I think it's because we don't have Bakugo bragging on Midoriya. Mineta pointed, seeing a disappointed Midoriya getting patted by Melissa, Momo, and Eri while Bakugo was still staring off into space. Hey guys, it's not over yet, Kirishima called out to the rest of the group. There are still 2 fighters left. Oh yeah, we haven't seen Blastoise after it was put to sleep. Tetsu perked up, hopeful his fighter was still okay. Maybe it was destroyed in that explosion. Bondo proposed the possibility. Unlikely, given that both Venusaur and Charizard, who were at the epicenter of the blast, survived. Kowaro pointed out. And it raised its defenses before it went to sleep, so he could have easily escaped the explosion unfazed. Manga jumped in, his text bubble face bearing the kanji for both defense and explosion. The scene switched over to Blastoise, still tucked and sleeping in his shell, as Venusaur's ripped off flowers rolled by like a tumbleweed. Oh, come on, you didn't have to show that. Setsuna whined at seeing a reminder of Venusaur's defeat. You think that's going to become a Bramblin or Bramblegast? Suka asked Reiko. I remember those Pokémon coming to be as souls, unable to move on, tumbling around in dried grass like that. Perhaps, Reiko answered, pleasantly surprised at Itsuka's knowledge of ghost-type Pokémon, a type that she always preferred. If the definition of soul qualified to both human and Pokémon. As the flower rolled off screen, some dust/smoke went into the tortoise-like Pokémon's shell. Wheezing for a bit, the shellfish Pokémon sneezed itself awake. And we're back, baby. Mirio cheered. I'm sure Blastoise will be a chew-in for the win. Silence was met by that pun, though a slight snicker broke through. Mirio perked up at hearing the slight sound of laughter and grinned brightly, immediately writing down that joke and execution in his notebook from Midoriya. Upon waking up, Blastoise looked at his remaining adversary, Charizard, on the other side of the wasteland. The screen started flashing, black squares coming out and covering the screen before a Pokeball came down and toward the audience. It went away and showed the two Pokémon standing across from each other, facing off. Oh, that's cool. Soto chuckled. It's like how you encounter wild Pokémon in the game before you battle in the older games. The final Pokémon battle started off with Blastoise firing a burst of water into the air. Storm clouds began to gather and rain soon fell upon the field. Rain dance. Momo guessed correctly. With it being just the two of them, Blastoise must have used it to give itself an advantage over Charizard. Not only will Charizard's fire-type attacks be weaker whilst Blastoise's water-type one becomes stronger, but the more the rain grows heavier and in contact with it, Charizard's tail flame runs the risk of getting to put out, thus killing it. Jiroda pointed out. As the rain came down, the two Pokémon simply stood there, waiting. Then a crash of lightning struck in the middle of the field, and the two roar and commence their final fight. Charizard charged quickly, striking multiple slashes as it scratched Blastoise's shell, but the tortoise with cannons countered, dodging the last slash aimed for its head and leaving the fire/flying type vulnerable. The pure water type chomped down with bite on Charizard's neck, the fire type bleeding and roaring in agony. Oh, that's got a sting. Awaze rubbed his neck. Charizard was pretty quick with those slashes because of its speed, but they didn't do much because of Blastoise's defenses. Sin commentated. Meanwhile, Blastoise's own bite did a lot of damage because of Charizard's feeble defenses by comparison, Monoma added. And if this Blastoise does possess the Rain Dish ability, it is likely healing progressively because of the rain. Flames spewed out of Charizard's mouth and onto the field, surrounding the two in Fire Spin. And now with Fire Spin, it is trying to whittle Blastoise's health, or cancel the Rain Dish ability by constant damage over constant health, Yui pointed out. Grabbing onto Charizard's wings, Blastoise reared its head back and struck the fire starter with Skull Bash, blood sprouting out from the impact. Charizard quickly retaliated by chomping on Blastoise's head multiple times, causing the water starter to bleed heavily just above his left eye. Jesus Christ! Kaminari cursed, hands over his eyes at the scene. Pokémon battles were never this gruesome. Because it's a children's game in our eyes or this universe, Shoji replied. But given the more gruesome backstory in some of their Pokédex entries and reality, this is likely possible. As the screen was going white as Charizard kept chomping on its head, Blastoise suddenly let out a roar and, with all his strength, ripped Charizard's wings off. No! Yes! The Charizard and Blastoise voters exclaimed in unison. The two were launched backward from the force, Blastoise landing away with a closed eye covered in blood. As the two Pokémon got up from their injuries, Blastoise rushed up and attacked, grabbing the flame Pokémon by his throat. Charizard tried to charge up Flamethrower, but Blastoise used both hands to grip Charizard's neck, causing the choking Pokémon to cease the attack. Oh no 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 no! Kaminari repeatedly shook his head. Yes 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 yes! Kirishima and Tetsu repeatedly nodded. Blastoise bent over, aiming his cannons towards Charizard's mouth, and began shooting Hydro Pump directly into Charizard's mouth. Charizard's body began to distend due to his belly, full of rapidly filling water. Okay. Nijire gulped, face turning green. I think I'm going to be sick. Izuku and Mirio clasped their hands over Aries and Kuta's eyes, despite their protest. With a roar, Blastoise let go of Charizard and launched the fire starter into the air. Blastoise continued to accurately shoot water into his midair opponent's mouth, Charizard's body flying off into the distance before exploding in guts, blood and water. The rain dance soon ended and the fire spin extinguished. Blastoise yelled out a triumphant roar at his victory. KO. The victorious Blastoise proceeds to eat the remains of Venusaur's flower while Charizard's remains are shown on the ground, all covered in blood as the flame on its tail goes out. And just as Charizard could not handle the water and exploded, the students could not hold in their stomachs and let out another round of barf into new barf bags. Charizard. New. Boomstick cried out in despair. Oh, and Froggy plant whatever a sore. I guess that flower isn't going to be a Bramblin or Bramblegast, huh? A still queasy Izuku tried to provide levity as she saw Blastoise snacking on Venusaur's flower. I appreciate the sentiment, but please silence, Reiko replied, even her queasy from the bloody death of the Charizard. Charizard's greater speed allowed first attack, and its proud warrior mentality led to striking Blastoise first. Wiz began explaining. But Venusaur knew he had to take Charizard down right away, so everyone's favorite fire lizard was doomed, taking too much damage early on from two different angles, Boomstick admitted. Hell, even from itself with self-damaging moves like Flare Blitz. True. Momo gulped down the last of her queasiness. If it had handled Venusaur first, then it might have stood a better chance against Blastoise later on. But Blastoise could have maxed its own defensive stats if those two would have fought instead, which would have screwed Charizard over a lot. Kyoka jumped in. But poor Venusaur didn't stand a chance against Charizard's dual typing, and the bulky defense of Blastoise was more than enough to outlast both of them. Was detailed. Also, since Charizard and Venusaur do not naturally learn Sunny Day, they could not counter the rain dance, leading to Blastoise's water-type moves having greater power while lowering Charizard's fire-type ones. And without Sunny Day, Venusaur couldn't power up Solar Beam faster than it could, and it would have increased Charizard's fire-type moves regardless, Izuku mentioned. Plus, if it had Solar Power, Charizard's hidden ability, it would have boosted Charizard's special attack even more, but at the price of damage over time, which would have been a major risk. Shinso also mentioned. But wizards, shouldn't they all just counter each other? Boomstick imitated an annoying fanboy with a sentence, tagged as an inevitable YouTube comment, with a dunce-looking Venusaur for added measure. Ah yes, the rock-paper-scissors factor is a bit tricky. Grass beats water, water beats fire, fire beats grass, was admitted, showing the type triangle of the three countering each other. But ultimately, the core of any Pokémon battle boils down to mathematics. If that's the case, then both Mina and Kaminari must suck at Pokémon. Kyoka snickered. Hey! Kaminari yelled, offended. It's true. Mina sighed, comically dejected. Every attack does a specific amount of damage, with specific effects to specific types with a specific accuracy. Was pointed out, showing for example all the numbers and percentages involved in Flamethrower, from its base power, accuracy, stab, alternate, super, and non-effects. The teachers tried to hide their snickers when they saw Ectoplasm, the math teacher among them, perk up proudly at his subject's relevancy and importance. And each Pokémon's stats are clearly displayed in the good old Pokédex. Boomstick jumped in. So, by comparing every move, effect, choice, order, and likeliness of occurrence, there are over 7,000 possible ways this battle royale could play out, was revealed. And out of all potential matches, Blastoise wins the majority. Wow, 17%. Setsuna was surprised at how few outcomes Venusaur had to win over the others. We didn't even stand a chance. Kinoko bemoaned. Ugh, so close. Kaminari groaned in disappointment. Noticing Bakugo was still not paying attention, Kaminari went up to Bakugo's ear and yelled, "Hey Kakin, I'm peeing in your soda." "The hell you will you dash." Bakugo blinked away from his momentary blind rage and noticed Kaminari pointing at the screen. He quickly realized what had happened. Fuck. Even when removing type effectiveness entirely, and pitting attack and special attack against defense and special defense, factoring against health and speed, the turtle tank still takes it. Boomstick agreed, showing the stat comparisons between Charizard and Blastoise, with Blastoise having greater attack, defense, and HP, the first two by a large margin, while Charizard only had better speed, special attack, and special defense, the latter two only by a little. Izuku sighed, disappointed, but wrote down the results all the same, to make sure not to make the same mistake again. Blastoise H2 owned. Boomstick punned. The winner is Blastoise, was announced. Claps of respect and victory sounded off, with Kominari mournfully saying farewell to his last pocket money to Kirishima. Setsuna had managed to snap Ibera out of her similar state to Bakugu and explained to her what had happened. Needless to say, Ibera was very much dejected, both at the outcome of the fight and for possibly giving Shiozaki the perfect ammunition to hold over her head for likely forever. Next time on Death Battle, Boomstick began the announcement for the next fight. The screen went dark, only for the sounds of robotic noises to come alive. The glowing blue, menacing, robotic eyes shined out of the darkness, flanked on either side by red lightsaber-like blades. The screen went dark again only for a second before more robotic noises sounded before it gained color to show a large, plume-headed robot, with laser-looking blades on its arms. Red energy glowed brighter and brighter in its chest before it lashed its arms back and chest out, firing off a massive stream of red energy. Fulgor versus Sector. Wait, is it another robo-battle? Nask. Pretty much, Rin said. And I think I know what's about to happen. As predicted, Izuku and Melissa had to restrain Mei into her seat, this time with Izuku trading seats with Ida to keep his hold on Black Whip over her from being a discomfort for the others. Eri was allowed to sit on Uraraka's lap, an adjustment Eri was at first against, simply because she wanted to stay by her papa, but with reassurances from him that it would likely be for one video, to not hurt Uraraka's feelings, and the promise of candy apples. Eri agreed and sat on Uraraka's lap, much to the Gravity Girl's delight. Remote now in his hands because of Mei's bindings, Izuku looked to Nizu's approval for the next fight. Upon receiving it, Izuku pressed a button, and the next video began to play.